for today. So before we get started, I want to share kind of my motivation for doing this session. And that is because this is a very common question that I get from Udacity students as well as some of my own personal clients, but it's a common question that you'll see and you may have personally experienced, and it may be the reason why you're joining in today. But one of the things that I've realized throughout my coaching career and through my own career is that you're not always going to be provided with opportunities to further your career. Sometimes those will be available to you, and sometimes you just have to create those for yourself. And this topic really inspired me because it was a big change in my own personal career where I felt like I was in more control and I felt more empowered and more independent to actually help myself progress to the next level. So this is definitely a skill that you all will probably use now as you're completing your nano degree or if you're already finished it, but also throughout the rest of your career, and keeping these things in mind as you progress and know that this is not something that you do once and never do again. It's something that you continue to do and a skill that you continue to build. So just a brief introduction of myself. So I'm a career coach here with Udacity. I've been here with Udacity since mid-April, so a little over 6 months. My background is in higher education, and I have previously worked with a lot of different college and university students, but upon starting my own coaching business, I've worked with a lot of different clients, ranging different age groups as well as different industries. I personally specialize in LinkedIn. That's one of the areas that I focus a lot of my energy and efforts towards. So if you're ever interested in LinkedIn specifically, feel free to reach out for a coaching session. But this is really my favorite thing that I like to do as a career coach, is getting to present to groups, whether it's via webinars or in person, and really engaging with groups so that we can kind of spread the knowledge and make sure that you all are prepared for entering your careers as well as furthering your careers. So a brief overview of today's agenda. So I already kind of introduced myself in the topic, but we're going to talk very briefly about why is it so important to have experience? Why are employers why are they stressing it so much for us to have this experience for being able to succeed well in the workplace, and how we can prove to them that we are capable of performing in those roles? We'll talk about how do we know what specific experiences we should be gaining. So if an employer says, we're looking for somebody with a little bit more experience, these are some strategies that you can use to figure out what those experiences are. We'll talk about ideas and strategies for actually gaining that experience. We'll continue talking about strategies for creating your own experiences. So not necessarily relying on anybody else to help you get these experiences that you need to be marketable to employers. And then we'll talk about a few other strategies. We'll open it up for some Q&A. So if you have any questions that you've been wanting to ask a coach, or if there are any questions that stem from this presentation, we will open that up for you to ask those questions. And then we will close out. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So the first question, and kind of a really important thing to know, is why is it important to have relevant experience when you're applying for a job or when you're in the process of getting a job? And so I put a note here because I think this is an issue that a lot of students and job seekers have, is they kind of approach the job search from their own perspective and not from the perspective of somebody who is actually hiring someone or someone who is a hiring manager. So as you go through this process, I want you to continue to kind of remove yourself from your current situation and put yourself in the mindset of somebody who's hiring for a job, somebody who is going to be there several hours a week and really committing to that business or that company or organization. So here are a couple of reasons why it's important. It gives you a chance to apply some of the skills that you're learning in real world situations. So very similar to, your nano degree or a college degree, you're getting to work on projects that are inspired by real world situations. And you're learning these skills that are going to be extremely relevant for the real world, but you're not actually using these to solve problems for a business. A lot of times, sometimes you will get the chance to do that, but employers want to see how you've actually done this in a real world setting so that they have a good understanding of how you might be able to do the same for them. What it also does is it showcases your ability to solve problems and accomplish goals. So if you've been to any of my webinars or had a coaching call with me, this is something that I stress a lot, is that every single job opening really that's ever existed is either there to solve a problem or accomplish a goal. And so if you're not able to showcase your ability to do that, then you're missing a huge opportunity to showcase being a quality candidate for that role. It also gives you a chance to showcase your ability to work on teams or with supervisors or direct reports. And so if you're doing nanodegree projects, or sometimes if you're working on a regular college degree, you're doing a lot of this work independently. And so it can be helpful to gain some real relevant experience working on teams or working with a supervisor or working with people that you supervise as a way to develop that skill set, because it's not necessarily something that you can just learn in a class and know how to do it. It's something that you have to learn and then practice and continue practicing. Another thing to mention is online courses often miss soft skills training. So that's something that you'll hear a lot from hiring managers, especially with younger professionals, that they lack the soft skills. They lack communication skills. They lack teamwork. They lack critical thinking and problem solving. And so that's what real world experience allows you to gain. And that sometimes online courses don't always allow you to do. And then lastly, this is kind of more personal, but it really helps narrow and solidify your career goals. And so if you have an interest in one area, let's say, for example, you're interested in digital marketing, and then you start to gain some experience and you realize maybe this isn't so much for me. Maybe I like the strategy side more. Maybe I want to work in a different area. You don't really get to gain that all the time just from learning. Sometimes you have to get in on the ground and actually start learning from those experiences to really figure out what you like as well as what you're good at, and then the opposite. So those types of things are very appealing to employers, because it goes through a lot of different things that you might not necessarily gain just from a degree or online learning platform. So I want you all to jump in and chime in the chat. So I want to know from you all, what are the types of jobs that you're trying to land now or after completing your nano degree? So what are the types of jobs that you're targeting? If this is something that you don't know, I highly suggest that you schedule a coaching call with one of us or take some time to reflect, because this can oftentimes be the first step in really creating an effective job search strategy. But I want to know what jobs you're targeting. So an AI engineer, front-end engineer, machine learning engineer. So the engineers are winning right now. Anybody else? Data engineer, machine learning engineer, front-end, full stack, digital marketing, data analyst, business analyst, machine learning. Okay, great. So we have a really good mix. Front-end engineer, a lot of people going after similar things, but it's good to know that. If you don't have a focus, I would suggest that you do some critical thinking, maybe reach out to a coach to kind of process that with you. But this can be one of the most important parts of actually, going through your job search strategy, because if you're lacking experience and you also don't know where you want to go, it can be very difficult for you to create the appropriate steps to gaining those experience, as well as landing jobs in those roles. So it's great that you have a solid idea of the types of jobs that you are targeting. So great, we have a good mix of different job goals. And so hopefully I can utilize that as we continue to go through the rest of the presentation. So addressing the next point, how do I know what experiences that I should be gaining? So one of the best resources is the job description. And I think that people oftentimes underestimate how important a job description is. I think oftentimes people will go job searching and they're looking for opportunities and they'll just apply based on the title and then the qualifications at the bottom. They don't actually read through the job description critically to have an understanding of what are the specific skills or experiences that they need to have. And so oftentimes job descriptions are broken down very similarly. There's kind of a similar template that most companies use. That first paragraph will usually be kind of an overview of the company. That second kind of paragraph, or the second major area, usually covers the overarching goal of that position. So it may include some high level roles and responsibilities that that person is kind of in charge of doing as it relates to the goals of the business. And then after that, you usually have some bullet pointed lists that kind of highlight more day-to-day or other types of functions. And so I would encourage you to really go through those critically and look and see what are the experiences that employers are looking for. So if you are targeting a machine learning engineer position, go through and find 5 or 6 different job descriptions. These don't necessarily have to be jobs that you plan on applying for, but review all of those and see what are the things that they have in common. Do I have all of these experiences and these skills that they're looking for? If not, there's a gap there, and you should start making a list of those. So if you notice that on 4 different job descriptions, it says that you need to have the ability to analyze data and present it in a way that's visually appealing or something like that. And if you don't have that experience, then maybe you can write that down and say, okay, one of the experiences that I need to gain is data visualization. So if I have experience learning that in an online course, that's helpful, but if I've never actually put it to use, then that's something that I need to kind of make a list of and work to gain experience doing that specifically. So job descriptions are a really great resource for that. And I would just encourage you, even outside of this presentation, as you're applying for jobs and looking for jobs, that needs to be reviewed extremely critically for every single aspect and every single stage of your job search. So knowing those job descriptions is very important. It's also helpful if you are trying to plan out your next steps. These are experiences that you can be gaining as you get there. So let's say, for example, you aren't ready to job search right now, but you know you might within the next 2 or 3 years. It's better that you start reviewing some of these job descriptions now so you can make a plan about, I'm going to gain this experience, I'm going to look to gain this experience, and I'm going to do that so that when it is time for my job search, I'm ready. And I don't have to say that I don't have these experiences, or you don't have to try to get them all at that time. You're being proactive about your approach. So next is informational interviews. So this is basically a chance for you to chat with somebody who may be in a role that you're looking to get into. So let's say you want to be a business analyst. An informational interview may just be a conversation that you're having with a business analyst that you know, or reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn, or maybe it's somebody who actually works in that role for the company that you're interested in working for. So informational interviews are basically just kind of a chance for you to sit down and have a conversation with someone to learn a little bit more. That's why it's called an informational interview. You're basically there to gain information and learn how you can better improve your chances for potentially applying for a role like that. So those are a couple different areas to consider as well. Somebody who's doing the role already that you may know, or may have easy access to, maybe in the same networking or professional group as you, or it could be somebody who actually works for that company, and you can actually ask them the questions. What are the experiences that you all are looking for? What things can I do to stand out as a qualified candidate? And then lastly, I would just include LinkedIn research. And so if you want to be an AI engineer, type that in the search box and find people who are actually doing that right now. Or if you want to be an Android developer, type that in and find people who are doing that right now. And then you can look at their description of their job and see some of the different things that they're doing. So you can use that as a way to determine whether or not there are experiences that you need to gain. And that gives you an idea of somebody who's actually doing it. It's not just some generic job description. It's actually somebody who's doing it on a day-to-day basis. These are all really good ways for you to kind of fill that gap. And so you're not wondering, well, what experiences should I be gaining? What skills should I be developing? These are all different tools that will give you that information. So let's take a look at this job posting that was actually on Udacity. So I pulled this because I wanted to show you kind of what you should be doing as you are going through and reviewing job descriptions. So if you're looking through, there's going to be a lot of different bullets highlighting all of the different things that you're going to be doing with that role. So what you're going to want to do is look for those major roles and responsibilities. What are the things that really stand out as being very important to that role? One of the things that I like to do personally is print it out. For me, I'm a very kind of hands-on visual person. I don't do everything on the computer, so it helps me to print it out. And then one of the things that I will do is I'll have like a yellow highlighter, and I'll highlight everything that I have in yellow. So these are the skills that I have. These are experiences that I can talk about. This is what I'm confident in. Use another color, maybe a green or an orange, and highlight the areas where you might be missing. So you're starting to indicate where are my gaps? Where are my gaps in experience? Where are my gaps in skill set? Where are my gaps in software knowledge? So that you have a visual breakdown of the things that you should be doing. And going back to what I mentioned before, doing this with a couple of different job descriptions so that you can kind of find some things in common, so that you're not spending hours upon hours preparing for one job description where that's the only one that asks you to have experience with a certain software program. You want to focus on kind of those major areas, because some of those very unique or specified qualifications are things that they're willing to train you on, but those major experiences are things that you're going to want to get. And so as you look at the experiences and skills that you do have, so maybe the ones that you highlighted in yellow, you can start to prepare some of your most impressive stories. So that if you do have time for an interview, you can talk about your ability to perform well in those roles and how you've already done it in the past. Not just saying that you can do it, showcasing that through stories of past successes. And then, like I said, make a list of the things that you don't have and use that as a guide. I made a note at the bottom, do not let job descriptions discourage you. I don't know that job seekers are oftentimes educated at how some companies create job descriptions, whereas a lot of these HR departments and a lot of the people who are creating these job descriptions are basically showcasing their ideal candidate. This is kind of the perfect person that they hope would apply for this job. And so if you're kind of behind on one area or another, or it asks for 5 years, but you only have 3, don't let these things discourage you. And I'll say that just from my own perspective, I've gotten probably 2 or 3 different jobs in my past that I wasn't technically qualified on paper. And it was because I was able to showcase the experiences that I did have. I was able to tell great stories, and I was able to convince them that they were not taking a risk by me being able to learn those other skills that I was missing. And so don't let those things discourage you from applying if you feel like you can do the job well. But you have to have a lot of self-awareness for that. You can't just say, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 1 year, but I could be a director because I'm a great leader. You know, be realistic and be self-aware of your skills and your experiences to know whether or not it's a job that you would actually stand a chance for, especially because every single job that you're applying for is also a competition with other qualified individuals. It's not just a matter of whether or not you can do it, it's still a competition. So keep all of those things in mind as you're reviewing those job descriptions. So now, probably what most of you came for, what are some ideas and strategies for me to actually gain some of these experiences that employers are saying that I need? So first things first, volunteer. So I have gotten to a point in my own career where it doesn't matter what level I'm at, I will always find a way to volunteer because I'm always looking to continue and grow. And as times change, there will become needs for multiple different kinds of experiences. So a couple of great opportunities are professional organizations. So if there are organizations in your area, they could be focused specifically on kind of your content area or your area of expertise, or they could be kind of community organizations. So for me, like I said, I'm based in Atlanta. I'm involved in the Urban League of Greater Atlanta Young Professionals. I'm also involved in the Hispanic and Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs organization out here. And so, like I said, even though I feel like I'm at a good place in my career, I don't want to take a step back and not continuously be working on what my goals are and what my next steps are. So professional organizations, whether they're community-based or based on your area of expertise, are great opportunities for you to not only gain experience, but network. And so one of the things that I would encourage you to do is look for those organizations that allow you to practice the things that you're learning. So for example, one of the organizations that I'm involved in, there is an innovation and technology committee. The organization is not focused on technology at all, but there's a committee that showcases that there's a need for having IT professionals help build this organization. So that would be a great way for you to gain some experience. Another thing that I think people oftentimes forget about is there are a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners who need a lot of help on the tech side. They may be extremely skilled in their content area, but they don't have a strong background in tech. And I promise you, being an entrepreneur myself, people are not going to be that hesitant to hire people who are willing to work for free, especially if you're able to showcase a passion for the work that they're doing, as well as some skill set that you have completed. So think about, people who you may know who are running businesses who may need help working on the back end of their website, or may need help automating some of their systems, or different areas where you feel like you could step in and really assist them. So that basically kind of covers small businesses as well. Maybe there's a restaurant down the street from your house where you love their food, but you know that there could be some improvements to their website or to their email marketing or to anything like that. Reach out, be able to work for free or work for, less amount of money so that you can gain that experience, especially with the skill sets that you all are gaining. We know that you deserve to be paid for that work, but oftentimes these companies and these entrepreneurs don't have the money to pay for you, but they have access to extremely beneficial networks, as well as potential opportunities to connect you with people who might be in that industry. And it's also a great way to build your resume. So don't ever count out volunteering, even though we all know that you deserve to be paid for your work. And then lastly, create your own jobs or your own internships. And so if you are able to find a company that you want to work for, it's probably going to be more likely for smaller companies to help you do this versus major companies. But you can actually go in and create your own kind of job description and present that as a proposal. One of the things that I did when I was in grad school was I found a department that never had any interns, and I drafted an entire job description and scheduled a meeting with the department head and presented that as a way to do a free internship for the semester. And they actually accepted it, and I was able to even get college credit for it. So don't underestimate the power of creating your own experiences. And a lot of times, if you're willing to invest and put in the time and effort up front, it'll make that decision a lot easier for the person who's making decisions. Because for the most part, people are lazy. If we're being honest, people can be very lazy, especially as it relates to their jobs and their job searches. So oftentimes the person who does the most work or was willing to showcase their work ethic up front are the ones who end up winning. Another opportunity is freelancing. This seems to scare people, and I'm not sure entirely why. But freelancing is a great way to develop skills as well as kind of generate some income for yourself, especially if you're not currently working. You can check out some of these platforms that I've listed, Fiverr, Upwork, or LinkedIn Profinder. LinkedIn Profinder was a game changer for me back in 2017 when I first started my business. I was just writing resumes. I wasn't even doing career coaching. I had completed a certification, and that was a great tool for me to start finding clients who were looking for resume writers. So if you're interested in kind of gaining some income as well as some experience while you're going through this process, give it a try. There's nothing that it can hurt from you at least making an effort to do this. because there's no way I would ever have this job with Udacity if it wasn't for me starting that business in 2017. I've never worked professionally as a career coach before this role. It was because I took on that certification and ran my own business and showcased my ability to help clients succeed through my business that made my candidacy appealing to Udacity. So don't underestimate the power of freelancing. You don't have to run $1 million business to be successful freelancer. You could make an extra 50 bucks a month and gain great experience, and that still could be worth it for you. But obviously that's going to depend on your situation, financially, as much time that you have, and how much you're willing to commit towards it. So like I mentioned, you can make money and build your portfolio while you continue to search. And then lastly, I put this under freelance because I think it can fit, is start a blog. This is a great opportunity for you to network. And I don't think that people realize the benefits of being able to do that. You can interview people for your blog as a great way to start off a connection with somebody. Let's say, there's somebody on LinkedIn in your area who works for a company that you're interested in. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm interested in interviewing you for my blog, and understanding what it's like as on a day-to-day basis for a Android developer or an iOS developer or something like that. It's also a great way for you to stay up to date on industry trends, so that as you're out connecting with people, you have an understanding of what are the hot topics that people are talking about. It showcases that you're well versed in your industry, as well as that you keep up to date on industry trends, which we all know is extremely important, but I think even more so important in tech because of how quickly it moves. But as I mentioned as well with the blog, is that you can also kind of reach out to people for interviews or feature them. A lot of times people are not going to hesitate from free publicity, so that can be a great opportunity for you as well. And that's something that you could very easily list on your resume, that you're kind of going through in between a gap period. And you can also include links to that as well. So don't hesitate to freelance. I will say that if you are looking for assistance with this, a lot of our career coaches do have their own businesses, but I wouldn't say that we are small business coaches, not all of us. So don't expect us to be able to give you the ins and outs of building a business and business planning strategy. But if you just kind of want some insights on what it's like for some of us, then that could be an option as well, because a lot of us do kind of do some of this work as well. And like I said, I wouldn't have this job right now if it wasn't for freelancing. So don't count it out, and don't be afraid to do it. There's nothing to fear as it relates to that. Let me see, looks like. Okay. So another thing to consider is take on some additional projects with your current employer. So if you're working in a role that is not so much related to what you want to do, but you know that your company has that department or people that are doing that kind of work, ask to join some of those committees or be involved with some of that work. Or take on more tech roles within your current job, things that are just kind of related to what you're wanting to do. And that can be really helpful for you as you think about transitioning, especially if you want to transition within your current company. I have talked to several Udacity students who want to stay with their current company, but want to do something more closely related to what they're doing their nano degree in. And some of them have been able to do that. So don't underestimate the power of gaining these experiences while you're still with your company. Another thing to consider is, maybe you don't have a company, but you kind of want to use this experience to get that. So I would really encourage that you look into these opportunities. If you have a good relationship with your supervisor or other leaders in the company, reach out to them and ask them if there are opportunities that they think might be beneficial for you, if it means you transitioning to a different role or a different company. But obviously you have to know your relationship with your supervisor. You can't just tell every single supervisor, hey, I'm ready to leave, can you help me do that? Some will be more supportive than others, so you have to kind of know that relationship. Another thing is shadow other employees. So maybe you take a half day to kind of just go through what it is like on a day-to-day basis with somebody who's in that role. That can give you an opportunity to not only gain some experience, but see what it's really like kind of on the in the grassroots, what it's like to really be working in that area. Another way is more additional informational interviews. So maybe interviewing people at your current company who are doing those things, ask them to meet you out for lunch, or maybe to grab coffee in between meetings or something like that, so that you can build more relationships with people who are in your current company. And then the last bullet, like I mentioned before, it can be much easier to transition within your current company than it can be if you're changing careers in general. So if you work at XYZ company and you want to work in a different company and you're trying to change careers, that's a lot more difficult than it is to change careers within your own company, because you've already kind of built that credibility. You've already showcased your work ethic. You've already invested in the company and their values. And so it can be a much easier transition to do that than to try to jump to a completely different company. And that can also be a great bridge to kind of address a gap between that career change. So maybe your dream job is to work at Apple as an iOS developer. Maybe that's too big of a jump for you right now. So maybe you transition to being an iOS developer in your current company. Now to Apple, you're a lot more appealing as a candidate than you would be trying to make that direct transition for some of those more competitive jobs. So keep those things in mind as well. Don't underestimate the things that are already made available to you within your current role. Okay, so that was a lot of different strategies and tips. So I want to know if there's anything that you've gained today or anything that you've been reflecting on recently. And I want to know, what are some things that you will do, or maybe one thing that you will do to start gaining some experience. I want like a very specific thing. So maybe you can say, I'm going to reach out to my cousin who builds websites, and I'm going to ask if I can help with the back end. So I want you to go ahead and type in the chat, what are some things that you will do, or just one thing that you will do, maybe this week, maybe next week, maybe next month, but not putting it off too late. What is something that you will do to start gaining some of these experiences that you know you'll need? I'm thinking about writing a blog and start taking interviews. Great, start a blog. Probably one of the easiest things that you can do to kind of start gaining experience. I will say that that's going to be more so helpful for kind of networking and staying up to date. There are still a lot of companies that are going to want to see some direct experience. So that alone may not be enough, but it's definitely a great start. What else? Reach out to university to find volunteering jobs. That's great. I'm already working for a friend's website. That's awesome. I'm going to freelance for subject matter experts. I know I need help with that. So don't ever underestimate that. Freelancing, great ideas. Look to contribute to GitHub projects. That's great. One of the things, and keep them in as I'm talking. Keep going. Tell me what you're going to do. You need to learn how to showcase these as well. So if you are taking the time to look into some of these opportunities to gain experience, you need to find a good way to sell that on your resume, to sell that on your LinkedIn, and to sell that in conversations to employers, because you are effectively selling yourself every time it comes to a job search. And so you need to be able to showcase that in a way that is relevant, impressive, and kind of powerful to those employers. Applying for intern. Good. As a front-end developer, running an AdWord campaign for my friends, configuring Google Analytics for her. I wish one of my friends would do that for me. So that's great. That's a great way for you to start utilizing some of those digital marketing skills that you're learning in your nano degree program. What else? Let's get a couple more. I'm working for my own website. That's great. Especially for somebody in digital marketing, you need to make sure that your personal marketing is on point. I had a conversation with a digital marketing student a couple of days ago, and I told them, if you don't have a good resume, I probably wouldn't trust your ability to market my own products if you can't market yourself. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. I've signed up for a Python class in Udacity because I've seen Python as a skill that many job descriptions required. Great. I also want to contribute to open source projects. Great. So these are all really good. I've been working as a freelance Android developer on Upwork, but an interviewer said freelancing doesn't count as experience. Don't listen to that. That is one person's opinion. Obviously, I think that I am an example that it does count as experience. I've been able to learn all of the different skills that I have as a career coach over the last several years just by doing it on my own, pursuing certifications and doing those things. So don't let one person's opinion let you decide how you're going to continue throughout your job search. So that's a couple of things to keep in mind as well. As you're talking to people, don't let people dictate the way that you conduct your own job search, because everybody's got an opinion, and that's what makes job searching difficult. There's no right way or no one way to do it. And so, I'll have different opinions from somebody else who might be a career coach, from somebody else who might be a recruiter. So think critically and figure out what works for you. But don't let that, I wouldn't pay attention to that. Freelancing absolutely counts as experience. Could you send the recording? So we record all of the webinars. So it's been recording as we're going. We won't send out the presentation, but the recording will be uploaded via YouTube, hopefully within the next couple of days. So if you have missed a couple of things, you can go back and rewatch this entire recording. So I'll make sure that that's sent out. It won't be sent to you directly via email. We'll probably post it in Student Hub. And then also just check out Udacity's YouTube page. So go to YouTube, find Udacity, go to the videos. You'll be able to find this one once it's uploaded, as well as all of the other webinars that me and the other career coaches have hosted in the past. Great. Okay, so let's move on. We only have a couple more slides, and then I want to open it up for questions. So just a couple of other things to consider. And I see Angela kindly sent the link here in the chat. So if you want to maybe click on that and then bookmark that, you can see the ones that we have recorded and the ones that we will continue to record. So a couple of other things to consider. Not going to go too much in depth with these because this isn't the topic of the webinar, but networking and personal branding are huge as it relates to this. And so networking, that means, in person, online, getting face-to-face time with people so that people know who you are and what you're looking to do. So check out meetups, look on Eventbrite for events that are going on in your area. Utilize LinkedIn as a way to connect with other people. That can be extremely helpful. And then also personal branding. People really underestimate the power of this. And what I mean by this is being recognized for what you're doing. So finding ways to showcase yourself as a subject matter expert. So for those of you who talked about, working with SMEs or working with entrepreneurs or subject matter experts to build their business, also pay attention to how they're branding themselves. So one of the things that I would share is LinkedIn is a great place to get started with that. Also finding maybe some tech blogs or getting featured in articles just to showcase your knowledge in this. Doing public speaking like this, webinars. It's not much to learn how to host a webinar on a topic of your expertise. Host it for free so people have knowledge of who you are and what you're doing. So one thing that I like to share as it relates to personal branding is because of the work that I've been able to do personally on my own brand and push that through LinkedIn. That's another reason why I got this job with Udacity is they actually reached out to me because they saw the work that I was doing and the content that I was putting out, as well as my past full-time role I got through LinkedIn from them finding me. So my last two official jobs, I've never even applied for. So keeping those things in mind as well as it relates to gaining experience, sometimes that experience can be your ability to showcase your knowledge and your subject matter expertise. So this is kind of a great area where that blogging would fall into. But don't ever underestimate these two things, especially together. They can be extremely powerful and make it that much easier for you to get a job if you do maybe lack some of the experience. If people know who you are and what you're good at, they may not need to see the hands-on experience that you have because you've already showcased your ability to do that work through social media, through getting featured in articles, doing public speaking, appearances, different things like that. So don't underestimate the two of these as it relates to that. If you need help with those any further, feel free to schedule a coaching call with myself or one of the other coaches. These are definitely areas that we can help you with. Okay, so I want to know from this presentation, because we are wrapping up, what is maybe your biggest takeaway? What is the thing that you've learned? And if you do still have questions, Feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat. I want to know what's your biggest takeaway, or if there was a question that I didn't address or something that you were hoping to gain that I can touch on today. Anybody have any takeaways or questions? Okay, I see a question in the chat. How to handle failure after a rejection at an interview. So one thing that people don't realize is that career coaches like myself and some of our other coaches, we still have career goals as well, and that we still get rejections from applying for jobs. Even when we sometimes feel like we're doing everything right, we still sometimes don't get that. So I think one thing to keep in mind is, it's always helpful to reach out to a coach or somebody for a second opinion, but just because you don't get a job does not mean that you're not qualified. It does not mean that you even need to work even harder sometimes. It can just mean that you weren't the right fit for them. And that's another thing to keep in mind, just to kind of help you with that, internally and mentally, is knowing that if I don't get a job, it's not because I wasn't good enough. It's still a competition. Most of you probably know who LeBron James is. He doesn't win every single game. He's really good, a very well-known player, but he doesn't win every single time. And so keep those things in mind as well. Another thing that I would consider is reaching out and asking for feedback. Chances are you probably won't get too many people who will actually provide you feedback, but sometimes you will. Another thing to consider is asking if there are other opportunities for you to be involved. So if some of you might be familiar with General Assembly, it's a company that I used to teach for, and I got that opportunity to teach with them because I missed out on a job that I actually applied for. So I reached out very humbly and asked if they had other opportunities and if they were interested in some of the workshops that I did, and that was a way for me to kind of deal with that rejection. But another thing for me personally is I'm always trying to figure out how I can get better. And so reflecting a lot after that interview and seeing if there are areas that you can improve on might help you add to that list of experiences that you should be gaining. Great question. One of the takeaways is push yourself to really find a job before it gets you. So yes, being proactive is extremely important. It really changes the game as it relates to the job search, because when you need a job, your mindset is affected by that. Your approach is affected by that. You sometimes come across more desperate than if you don't need a job. And so it's helpful to start implementing some of these things in advance while you're happy in your job, so that you don't have to go through that struggle or that really difficult transition when it's time for you to make that move. Networking and personal branding is the takeaway. Okay, well, that's good to know as well. Maybe that'll be the topic for one of our future webinars. How to handle a long gap of 9 years, though the relevant experience years back, how to prove worth. So that's really challenging, especially if you have a gap. I would make sure that that gap is addressed, because if you just kind of try to hide it or cover it up, chances are employers or recruiters are going to have questions about that, and they will get a vibe that you're trying to hide that you have a gap. So I would say, maybe fill that gap in with what you were doing. It doesn't mean that you have to list it out as a job, but maybe you were taking care of a sick family member. You could maybe list that on your resume so they have an understanding of what you were doing within that time. But one thing that I would really consider as it relates to gaps is don't let it happen to you if you have a choice. So let's say, for example, you need to quit your job, or you need to move back home, or maybe you're having a baby and you want to take care of that. Find ways to continue building your experience. So maybe during that transition period, you're blogging or you're freelancing in your spare time as a way to not have a gap. But addressing that gap, I would say kind of address it up front. And if you are kind of writing a cover letter, this is my personal opinion. This is not necessarily what everybody would recommend that you do, but I'm very big on addressing everything up front and being transparent so that nobody's time is wasted. So that, if they have an issue with it, then we don't have to go through 3 interviews for you to realize that my gap is a problem to you. Blogging and freelancing is the takeaway. Okay, how to handle a gap. We kind of addressed that a little bit. And then also, I believe Angela did Angela did a webinar on addressing a gap. So that webinar, I would encourage you check out, and that should be on that same link that she posted earlier. All of our videos are there. Analyzing job postings, yes, is extremely important. So you said tech changes quickly. Is that why there seems to be a trend of people getting jobs and only staying a few years? Do people stay at jobs for 15 years or more? So I think tech has something to do with it, but I also think that it just, this is my personal opinion, but I think it also has to deal with generational differences. So for, older generations, they were loyal to their companies because their companies were loyal to them. And then you started seeing a lot of, maybe like my parents and people their age were getting laid off from jobs. And so you started to lose a little bit of that trust in the companies that you worked for. You no longer see people working for a company and working there until retirement because there just aren't as many benefits as there used to be to doing that. But also, like I said, my personal opinion, a lot of younger people and a lot of millennials aren't having children as much as older generations were. So they're very focused on their careers and they're focused on career growth. And so if you're in a role for 2 to 3 years and you've learned about as much as you can learn, there's a big emphasis on, young professionals and millennials on wanting to advance and learning new skills. And so I think that's oftentimes another reason why people change careers. But like I said, that's just a personal opinion. There are probably a lot of different reasons why that might happen. Positioning and networking is my takeaway. That's definitely a great takeaway. How to gain experience as an Android developer. On freelancing websites, you don't get projects unless unless you can showcase. I think I'm behind. So as it relates to getting that, freelancing is difficult, especially in the beginning. So I would encourage you to work for friends or work for free and then start to gain some of those testimonials. And so as I mentioned before, when I started, I was doing resume writing. And so I would help friends, I would help family members, I would do workshops for free. And my only ask in return from that was for people to share their experience working with me. And so I was able to showcase through my LinkedIn profile, as well as like Google reviews and different things like that, people rating me 5 stars and saying, Brett helped me, revise my resume, that helped me get several more interviews. And so it may be helpful for you to get started doing those things first, but it's definitely a lot harder in the initial stages. And so maybe you have to do things at a lower rate than you might do, or do them for free. But, if you are going to do something for free, at least ask for something like a testimonial in return for that. And then as you're working with people, depending on the type of freelancing work that you're doing, always try to track the progress that you're making. So if you are an Android developer and you develop something for someone, track how many visits they're getting, or how many people are downloading those apps, or whatever metrics or insights make sense for your business. If you can combine testimonials with success stories, then it's hard for people to disagree with you, especially if you're offering it at an affordable rate. So trust me, I know for a fact that it can be difficult. Especially in those early stages. So I would encourage you, if you're looking into some of those other freelance platforms and those aren't working, maybe take a look at LinkedIn Pro Finder. As I said, that one was really helpful for me, especially when I was getting started. Let's see, can you cover personal branding and blogging in the future? Absolutely. Now I don't have to think of my next topic. So thank you for that. I'll probably talk a little bit about personal branding, getting featured in articles and stuff. Now that I know that students will show up for that, I will definitely do that. How to talk about Udacity nano degree in my resume. So this is a great question. I get this question a lot from students. So there are a couple of different ways to do it. And sometimes it really is going to depend on your situation. But one of the things that I like to share is that as quickly and as well as Udacity is growing, it's not a household name. It's not the same idea of going to, blank university or whatever. And so as it continues to grow, it will start becoming more known. But in my opinion, it wouldn't be helpful to just simply list out digital marketing nano degree, Udacity, October 2019, because if people aren't fully familiar with what Udacity is or what a nano degree is, that could mean 2 hours. It could mean 2 days, 2 weeks. But as we all know, a nano degree program does not ever get completed that quickly. And so it may be helpful for you to provide some context into how long the program takes, maybe including a link to the curriculum, maybe showcasing some of your projects, which can be really helpful. But I would definitely encourage you to do more than simply listing it, just because not everybody's going to know exactly what that means. Obviously, some of the bigger companies, some of the tech companies are going to be a lot more familiar. But if you're applying for jobs, I would highly recommend that you provide a little bit more context for people who may not be fully familiar with what that looks like. But I think that's a question that might be a little bit more helpful if you were to schedule a coaching session, so we can think about what makes the most sense for you specifically versus kind of generally for Udacity students. Cool. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather chat, or type it in the chat box as well. But are there any other questions before we wrap up? Precious, do you have a question?
No, not really.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you. I think it might be a little distracting. Okay, sometimes so much about Udacity in one-page resume. So I think that it goes back to the other question. I think that's a very individualized kind of question that might be a little bit better help if you schedule a coaching call with myself or one of the other coaches, so that we can look at your current situation and see what things can be moved, what things can be taken out, what things can be swapped and switched. That's a very kind of individualized question that can sometimes be hard to address. And don't feel bad if you have to go over one page. I know that there's a lot of different opinions. Like I said, with a lot of different things as it relates to job searching, people will say that it has to be this way. And I think that that continues to be proven wrong as people continue to do things that aren't in alignment with that and still get jobs and still impress employers. And so if you need to go to 2 pages, I think that that's perfectly fine. I think once you start approaching like 3 pages, it's kind of like, is everything on here really relevant? Is everything on here really showcasing your ability to do well in this specific job? Or are you just kind of listing out everything that you've ever done? So I would encourage you to schedule a coaching session. Yes, the recording will be available. It'll be on YouTube as soon as it's processed and uploaded. It's also helpful to check out that Udacity YouTube page to see all of the other webinars that we've hosted in the past. Where should I put Udacity? An education section or work project section on a resume? Once again, that's a question that I think would be better addressed in a coaching call, because it can depend sometimes. Some people, I've seen it in their education section look great. Some people have had a separate section for projects, which looks great. It just depends on your current situation and what makes the most sense, because your resume also has to have somewhat of a logical flow to it. You don't want to be bouncing around everywhere trying to figure out what's going on. So I think that just depends. Are you still working for Udacity? Absolutely. That's why I'm doing this webinar. So if you do want to schedule a coaching call, feel free to, and I'll probably be working on that next webinar as well around the topic of personal branding, since it sounds like people might be interested in that. Okay, well, thank you all so much for attending. We had quite a bit of people join, so thank you for taking time out of your day to invest in yourself and really learn how you can start developing experience and gaining these experiences for yourself. It's a great skill to kind of learn, and something that you should probably continue doing throughout your entire career. So if you do have any additional questions or want some individual ideas, definitely feel free to check out some of our previous webinars. Make sure to check out some of our future webinars. Stay engaged in the Student Hub, schedule coaching sessions. We are here to help you. But one of the things that I always mention to students is we're not going to do it for you. So we can't get experience for you. We can't contact employers for you. We can give you the skills that you need in order to gain those experiences for yourself, but you have to kind of meet us halfway, and you have to be willing to put in that work for yourself as well. So once again, thank you for joining. Feel free to schedule a coaching session with myself or one of any other coaches. If you do have additional questions, feel free to contact career.support@udacity.com, or post your questions in the Student Hub. We should be able to either answer or direct you to the appropriate channels. Once again, thank you all. I'll make sure to get this recording up as soon as I can, so that you all can watch it as many different times as you want. But thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your day.